way, more precipitation to areas that really need it is also looking to be on the horizon according to these models. So just all sorts of good news today to kind of go over. So let's first off take a look. We'll talk about this tropical system in a moment, but we have two major systems as I was mentioning. So one here over the northern plains and kind of upper Midwest area, and we could see this is a pretty dynamic system. Low is probably, these are always outdated. I always tell you guys that. They only update it every few hours. So the low is probably more like here. And we could see more of a warm front structure out ahead and then more of a cold front kind of underneath taking place currently. So we have a lot of showers along that cold front. We have a lot of showers along the warm front and along the low. Overall, just an impactful system. Some showery activity kind of lagging behind it, but just an overall rainy day for the northern plains and upper Midwest there. Our next pretty major low right here is going to be just near Montreal in Canada, so just to the north of the northeast here. And we can see a lot of dynamics with this one. Kind of a warm front up above, and then an occluded front, and then sort of a cold front underneath. So a really interesting system, but in general, overall showers and heavy rainfall can be anticipated for the northeast, and then areas also near Quebec and Montreal, and just to the north of there, even Ottawa in Canada. Now, I do want to deep dive into this tropical system, so we're going to go ahead and put the satellite imagery on so we can talk about this one. Now, as we take a look here, I'm going to put this in motion. We can see this really is a very organized area of tropical kind of interest here, just to the west of the Eastern Caribbean. So it's kind of sitting between Puerto Rico, the Eastern Caribbean, and South America. It's really interesting. This thing's fitting in just like a puzzle piece here. So there's South America. Here's your kind of Eastern Caribbean, and then Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. And you can see it's just really fitting right in there like a puzzle piece. And for a tropical system, land can create problems, but if it's not over the land, which this one is just narrowly not over any of these land masses, it's kind of free to develop. Now, I always mention this is a little bit of a drier region here, northern South America and the very far southern Caribbean, and typically that can cause problems for tropical systems. I want to watch curiously how far north or how far south this thing tracks into this cone area. Now, if it's in the middle, I think it'll be able to develop quite nicely, and definitely if it's on the northern portion of this cone area, I think it will. But if it's on the very southern end, I think that's our kind of route for this one to really struggle to develop, is if it just lags way to the south. So time will tell what ends up happening. But as far as percentages, we sit at a 70% chance of development over the next 48 hours, and then a 90% chance of development over the next 7 days. So in all likelihood, this one will end up developing. And as far as tracks, we've seen a lot of different models showing wildly different things. We've seen kind of this like curvature to the north, almost impacting Cuba or Haiti or Dominican Republic here, and then heading out to sea. We've also seen some of these kind of just meander onto the south and be less impactful and overall not develop as well because, again, it's further to the south. And then we've seen some bringing it kind of into Cuba or Florida or towards the east or into the Gulf, but there's actually a little bit less of that. At this point, anything kind of goes, and I always tell you guys that once these systems develop, typically we get a lot more of a concise overall opinion from the models on what they expect to happen, but really anything goes right now. We're going to have to track this one very closely. I always think that these late October threats, they really make me nervous. The waters are just really ripe out there in the Gulf and the Caribbean, and the sky is unfortunately the limit with this one. So we're going to watch it really closely over the coming days. So let's go ahead and move on and take a look at some of your model guidance. Taking a look here at the overall storminess from our European model. By the time we're reaching tomorrow afternoon, I'm just going to skip since we kind of went over the current conditions already. It's already 4 p.m. when I'm recording this, so really this isn't that far away tomorrow. You kind of can get an idea of what's going to be happening this evening. Pretty much the same stuff. We do see this low that was over the upper Midwest and northern plains has shifted a little bit to the east, more towards the Great Lakes, still just causing showery and heavy rainfall activity for a wide variety of locations. It is a very dynamic and very large storm system, so you know this one is really going to cause a not a wide variety of impacts, but a wide range of impacts as far as actual space and area So definitely going to be one to have to watch. And when we look at the jet stream and just the flow of everything, it's clearly a ridge in the west, trough in the east ongoing. Maybe that was a little bit to the east there. Something like this is what we're seeing. The east is still a little warmer. This is all moving eastward though. So as we move towards Wednesday, we see a lot more of a purely trough in the east, ridge in the west. We call this a positive PNA pattern when we see warmer air just really prevailing from Mexico through the western United States and up into the western areas of Canada. And this causes an imbalance. That warmer air is heading way further northward than it should. It's displacing a lot of cold air that should be in that area. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to spill over, is what I call it, into areas further to the east here. And that's exactly what we're seeing on screen. These two lows, mostly the one to the west, though, really combined to just now even spread even further with the impacts. We see areas in central Canada and Minnesota all the way eastward to Maine and eastern Canada and everywhere in between here, seeing really dreary, cooler weather, lots of showers, just lots of clouds. Many areas within here will not see the sun on Wednesday, so it is going to be just really, really dreary. Looking at Thursday, this cooldown is a slow mover, so this was going to be a pretty significant one as far as the amount of time that it takes up. Moving towards Friday, we see that it is finally lifting off, but it's still cooler in the east than the west by this point. We do see a lot of the central states dealing with some precipitation once again, and even the northwest beginning to get another storm system impacting them from northern Canada into Oregon and Washington, even snowfall in the high elevations. We have another pretty major storm system headed that way. Saturday here on the 25th, we do see, again, this is a more expansive system by this point. This low is coming on shore to Oregon and Washington. More snowfall as colder air is able to work its way in. The northern Rockies and Cascades are all kind of seeing some snowfall for the high elevations. Obviously, tons of rainfall throughout the lower elevations. This is a really messy storm out there in the northwest. And by this point, we have kind of a neutral pattern along the west, a ridge in the central, and still a bit of a trough in the east as that thing is hanging on for dear life. The south central states still dealing with some showery activity as far out as Saturday on the 25th. Sunday on the 26th doesn't look too different. It gets even more wintry in the northwest, though, throughout a lot of the Cascades and Rockies here. Your actual low pressure center is now more so around for Wyoming and Montana. A little bit of lifting happening out to the east of it, which is very, very common. And this causes some more what I call tropical type showers and thunderstorms, but really that's not like tropical activity. It's more so just coming from the Gulf and like tropical regions and bringing higher humidity and higher temperatures, much more what you would see again in those more tropical environments. And if you've been to the tropics at all, you know that, downpours and humid weather is just a really, really common thing down there. Monday on the 27th, we see kind of a dual area of lows, a weaker one up to the north and then a 992, not that much stronger down there for Kansas and Nebraska, bringing just tons of precipitation for all of these areas. Your jet stream is a pretty large Rockies trough here. We also see another trough kind of for eastern Canada into kind of eastern New England, mostly a warmer sector over the Midwest into the southeast and kind of Great Lakes area where there's just a ton of activity throughout a lot of these different areas. Moving towards Tuesday on the 28th, this gets even more interesting. 983 there over the northern plains and upper Midwest. This is a monster of a storm. We see a cold front bowing way out to the east of that low, and we see a warm front that's extending way far to the west of that low. This is a very unique look. This is just an incredible look. And what this causes is warmer, more humid air to move up the east coast and then kind of swing over top of this whole low to the north and to the west eventually, causing a lot more mild conditions for central and eastern Canada, whereas western Canada is much, much cooler. You could make the argument that likely Kansas, Missouri here, maybe even Oklahoma and Arkansas are much cooler than areas to the north of the Great Lakes in this instance because of this very, very unique storm system this is just a crazy look. I hope it all makes sense because this is not something you see every day, but this is causing heavy, heavy rainfall, obviously nearby that low, but also the cold front. By this point, it's bowed out so far. I don't know how quickly it's going to be able to move. It might actually become a more stationary front, which would lead towards even more precipitation in the east the slower this thing moves, just like hanging out over the east coast over time. Here's Wednesday afternoon on the 29th, and we just see precipitation from the southeast into the mid-Atlantic, heavy in some spots, especially in the mid-Atlantic. And then we see the low has weakened significantly, bringing showery and dreary, cooler weather over the north central states, but much less impactful. Our tropical system is, you probably can't see it, but it's over eastern Cuba here, just to the south of where I drew that line. So this is more of a curve out to sea look. And by Thursday afternoon, you can actually see it likely there, just to the east of the Bahamas. So again, this European model wants to go with that kind of developing over the southern Caribbean and then curving straight to the north, somewhere between Haiti and Cuba, before moving out to sea. Again, we have had some solutions showing this thing much closer to the East Coast, or even some showing some sort of Gulf entry. But if we have a trough like this, a ridge in the west, trough in the east, which we do anticipate, that's going to create a lot of like lifting in these eastern areas. That's going to be the general flow. So it would be really, really hard for this system to move into the Gulf and not get pulled back off to the east, where the general flow is headed. And I think that it catches on to a lot of that way earlier on, and that's why we're seeing it curve out to sea way off to the east here. I think that that's going to be the outcome overall. Friday on the 31st here, this will be Halloween day. We do have some stormy weather in the east, unfortunately. We kind of talk about Halloween every year just for the trick-or-treaters and everything. I know there's a lot of parents and grandparents that watch the channel, so I always try to kind of fill you guys in on what's going on. And actually, since I've started my YouTube channel, most years we get incredibly lucky, and it's mostly nice. This time of year, you usually expect to see some storminess over the northwest, perhaps. Everything else is kind of up in the air, no pun intended, but in this case, this would be a disaster of a Halloween. I mean, we would be looking at really messy weather for the Midwest, areas like Chicago, Detroit, all the big cities in Ohio, like Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. We see a lot of storminess along your big mid-Atlantic cities like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Richmond, Virginia here. The Raleigh area. This is a lot of big time areas, even New York City kind of looking a little messy, and then Buffalo, New York. This is just a lot of big areas with lots and lots of kids that are going to be trick-or-treating, where it's just going to be nasty. If this is the case, of course. I don't want to be too like glass half empty, but this is 270 hours out, so typically we call that the long range, and typically I would tell you to take it with a grain of salt, and I'm going to do that again today. So don't get your hopes down, don't change plans on account of this yet. It's just something to watch for. But we're going to keep you guys up to date every day when I'll try to remember at least when I see the date, October 31st, to kind of give you guys a trick-or-treater breakdown, if you will. Now, as we keep going towards Saturday, the 1st of November, we see that this low begins to kind of get its act together over Indiana. A bit of a frontal boundary off to the east here. This should generally be moving northward, just like this. So a little bit of a warmer flow into the southeast. This is another odd looking storm, and then it kind of just moves offshore. We do get another trough here in the east at the very, very end of the model run. Now, as we take a look at the total precipitation, that cold front does stall out over the east, and that's why we get an extra large amount over the mid-Atlantic and kind of Carolinas area here. But generally, from the plains eastward, this is a much improved look. We saw similar things yesterday, and we're sticking with it on the models. This would be incredible news for these areas that really, really need precipitation. And for like the third or fourth day in a row, we're continuing to kind of back off for the northwest and seeing lower and lower and lower amounts as a lot of your activity is kind of shifting eastward. We've been stuck in a western, very cool, very stormy pattern with a boring, kind of slightly warmer pattern in the east. It seems like we're going to do a little turnaround and kind of flip the areas that are seeing those two different types of conditions. Time will tell, of course. Looking at the anomalies, the precipitation anomalies, you can see that only a little bit of the northwest is above average at this point, but most of the central and eastern states are above average now, particularly the northern plains, and then again that mid-Atlantic kind of Carolinas area are the most above average. Total snowfall, really nothing's changed too much. Cascades, Sierra Nevada, and Rockies all seeing snowfall here. We do see some of the northern plains seeing some snowfall. It's not unheard of, obviously, for this time of year, so it's not like too far-fetched, but this is just popping up on the models, so take it with a bit of a grain of salt until we get some solid daily consistency with something like this, but I'll keep you guys updated on that as well. Looking at the temperatures here on our European model, we will dive into the GFS model as well, but We do see this cooldown that we're currently going through is going to be here still for tomorrow on Tuesday, although it's kind of coming to an end, I'm not going to lie, maybe lasting into the morning, but by the time we're reaching the afternoon, we see a brief little warm spike along the East Coast. But look at this, we got cooldown number 2 already moving in a hurry, and this is going to take over the East as well. And the reason why we're seeing cooldown after cooldown after cooldown in the same area is because this warmer air is just staying put. This is not coming to an end. This is just kind of sticking around. So every little burst of cold air that's moving down from the Arctic is just hitting the same exact place over and over and over again. And that's what happens when you get these positive PNA patterns that want to just put their anchors down really over that area. It really leads to repetitive cooldowns. So cooldown number 2 there in the East, this one's pretty significant. The blues are all 5 to 10 degrees below normal mostly. The greens are 10 to 15 degrees below normal, which is considerable. That is really far below normal. And we would be talking about a lot of first frosts in these areas, maybe even first freezes for very far northern areas. Really, really chilly. Moving towards the 24th, 25th, 26th, that cooldown wants to just stick around. And then again, we warm up briefly in the East, but then we get another cooldown. On the European model for this Halloween and then November 1st cooldown, it wants it to be mostly in the deeper south areas along the Gulf Coast and maybe into the Midwest here and Mid-Atlantic, but more northern areas being a little bit further above normal. But here when we look at the GFS, we'll see in a minute, it's a little bit more of a just full-blown cooldown for the central and eastern states, that final one. But we have that ongoing one. We get the second one here that lasts multiple days in the East. We do warm up. It's like a battle between the cold and warmth here. And then we get a really big one here at the end of the model run. This is obviously vastly different than the European model, where we get still this warmer air along the west, which again is making everything possible, but really cold for almost all the eastern states and all the central states here to start out in November. So a little bit more intense here on this model, but they generally have the same idea, which is going to bode well for these longer range kind of images that we're getting from the models. You want to see agreement at least to have any idea of accuracy. So when we get the models really, really agreeing, you got to think, okay, like there's a pretty key reason why 2 completely separate models would have the same conclusion, even if it is far out. And those key things are really the things that we latch onto when we're talking about beyond 10 days out, because that's all we have. So it's really critical to look for those consistencies and stuff, and that's kind of what I feel like I'm seeing here for early November, which we will continue to track every single day. And speaking of every single day, we upload every single day, so be sure to subscribe. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did